Starting just a meet with the PedalStart, which is a escalator program. We have also participated with this. We have got the opportunity for raising the fund as well. So today it's our first meet, community meet, that will provide the brief introduction about the startup, how to build it, and how to introduce the other product market fit, and how to prove of the concept there. So just we want to start this, and some summaries are introducing in the sessions. So just to look it and understand the what is actually scenario which is provided by.
The meaning of that, how you can basically integrate these frameworks into your own startup. We'll try to give you guys a understanding around that front, right? So before probably jumping into the session, I'll just quickly give a brief introduction about myself as well. So myself, Monish, I joined PedalStart in August of 23. So I joined in the first batch of the PedalStar's fellowship that was started by PedalStart, right? So a brief context as to what Pedal Stars was. So basically, the concept behind Pedal Stars was to build young startup enthusiasts or freshers who were straight out of the college to train them so that they can eventually work as a core team member into the portfolio startups that Pedal Start had, right, or has. So joined in into the first batch of the Pedal Stars Fellowship, went through a pretty rigorous training of 3 months, right? So we got to understand how actually things are built from scratch, right? So I had a certain interest in building startups, but I was not pretty much aware as to what kind of execution one requires to build something from scratch, right? So got that understanding through this fellowship, and eventually post completion of that fellowship, I, to be honest, I love the culture and the work ethic that PedalStart had or has, and I continued with PedalStart only, and currently working with the community team, right? And now jumping on to this particular session. So, like I mentioned, we'll be covering the different stages, the different frameworks that one can integrate into their existing businesses, and eventually you can say build a journey along with that, right? So for this particular session today, we have Chintan sir with us. So Chintan sir is part of the core team at PedalStart. So he worked in many senior positions in multiple startups, has a vast experience of 8+ years. So recently, the last startup that he was part of was Traflan, right? So working as a general manager over there. So he'll be the one who will be sharing his particular experience as to what these different stages mean and how you guys can incorporate this into your businesses, right? So moving on, probably to the first slide, right? So yeah, so in this particular session, we'll majorly try to cover these three questions. What is a product market fit? How do you get there? And whether it can be quantified or not, right? So we'll try to answer these three questions. And to reach a stage of product market fit, basically, a startup needs to go through these following four major concepts, right? One needs to validate their idea. They have to build a proof of concept, have to build a prototype, and eventually release a minimum viable product in the market, right? So these are the four major steps that we'll be covering in this session, right? And if you guys have any questions between the session or anytime else, you can drop in your questions in Q&A section, right? Moving forward into the idea validation stage, right? So this slide basically mentions the definition of what validating an idea exactly means, right? But over here, I would probably love to understand from Chantan sir, okay, what exactly is idea validation? What's the importance of it according to him? So he have been talking with multiple startups into our community. Some of them are part of this particular session. So Chintan sir, if you can probably explain as to what exactly is idea validation, how to validate one's idea, what are the different key points one needs to keep in mind while validating their idea.
Hey guys. So glad to, first of all, very glad to be here. Another session of Pedal Start community. Some of you might know me, for some of you, I might be new. But having worked with startups for the past 8 years, 5 years before that in corporate, I've seen zero to one journey of a lot of startups, and at PedalStart, I think I would have interacted with 300 plus startups over the last 7 months. So being able to understand exactly how does that journey encompass with that idea firstly coming on into your mind, and then how does how does the journey from there go on. So it's a very interesting thing. But primarily, as Monish said, ki there are primarily four steps to it. So it's just the structure we have tried to put it into. It's not necessary. It's not hard coded, but it's just a structure we've tried to put into. Idea validation, then POC, then MVP, and then PMF. What exactly are these is something which we will try to make you understand. See, the point of putting it in a structure and sort of explaining it to you guys is primarily because having spoken to so many founders, a lot of times founders think that they have achieved product market fit by speaking to a few customers and seeing a general acceptance of the product. That is when they feel that they have achieved product market fit. Whereas that is usually not the case. Product market fit is something which comes a lot later, and it encompasses a lot of other details, a lot of extra details, uh, which a startup must have. But initially, I think one starts with idea validation. For example, an idea might come into your mind that, okay, I probably want to do this. For example, I want to build a SaaS platform, right? So, how do you sort of go about and sort of validate it, right? You sort of go about and firstly you try to figure out the problem statement. Does this problem actually exist in the market or not, right? For that, you talk to prospective customers, to prospective operators. That this is something which I feel that is a problem there in the market, which I believe I can solve using probably maybe one or two or three sort of ideas. And you go about and seek validation for that idea by talking to different people, by talking to prospective customers. Again, idea validation and POC are probably interlinked a bit. Hence, I might sort of go into POC also while explaining, sort of idea validation. So, sort of when you sort of try to validate your idea, you try to figure out key what exactly is your target audience. For example, if you want to build a SaaS product, you need to figure out whether it is for startup, whether it is for MSMEs, or whether it is for enterprise clients, right? So that is something which you need to be very clear about, right? If you're building a D2C product, you need to be very clear ki exactly target audience kya hai uski. Is it like young females, or is it like sort of older females having a certain amount of disposable income? So I think having a target audience is in your mind is very important. Once you have sort of figured out that target audience, then I think Monish, we can move on to the next slide. So then we need to probably collect sort of the user feedback from people that okay, this is what I've thought. What do you think about it, right? From the actual people who are going to be consuming your product. And that is where people will start to give you idea, okay, "Boss, ye to chalega hi nahi." This is something which we don't even require. So for example, if there are, let's say, 10 South Indian restaurants in a 1 kilometer radius, and you open another 11th one, no matter how different you are, you might not survive because people don't really need that South Indian restaurant in that particular area, right? So probably doing that is not that great an idea, right? So a lot of times why startups fail is probably because the market doesn't really require which validate by taking user feedback in the very beginning. And that is where you pivot also ki, okay, if this is not work, can this work or not? Right? A lot of pivots happen during this phase also, not during right? It might not make a lot of sense to go ahead and sort of make that product, or might need to figure out ki kya differentiation अपन ला सकते हैं उसमें. So I think that is the broader crux of idea validation. Ki how do you sort of go about and validate that idea? Probably this is something which will help you structure this. There are obviously you can do a lot of other things as well, but it's probably one nice way of structuring your idea validation. Yeah.
Okay, understood, sir. So there is one question: ke, what if my customers are not ready to talk with? What to do in that case?
The customers, if you're touching the right wavelength of the customer, see, a customer will always talk to you. It's cases you should be able to monetize your MVP as well. It depends from to monetize your.
How do we move forward post this MVP? How does that journey probably look like?
A lot of validation comes from the fact that itself, right? How much
Right,
are the users liking it? What sort of feedback are they giving? Because you moved from a purely offline thing to an online thing. You built a
right,
product, right?
yeah,
So how is the customer sort of adapting to that journey from offline to online? Is the customer engaging with you on that
okay,
MVP? Is the customer using? These are the places where, if you are an online product, your MAU, monthly average usage, and DAU, daily average usage, comes into picture. Because despite the fact that you only have a few features, if people are coming onto your product, using your product, that is a great way of sort of validating whether the product is good or not. And again, revenue is again another very, I think revenue is probably the biggest output parameter which you can get. If people
yeah.
are willing to pay for your MVP, I'm sure they're willing to pay for a lot more for the full product.
Okay. Okay. So there is one question from Amit. So he wants to ask, is MVP an option for a B2B product? The key question, how do you drive a customer engagement in a corporate world with something which is partial? Right. Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. I mean, I again don't fully, sort of agree to it. I'm sure you can do a lot of things in the corporate world itself, right? Just by building an MVP. For example, if you talk about an HRMS tool, right? Again, it is not something which it is not some. It is a corporate tool, right? HRMS, right? And to be honest, in my a few previous companies, apart from one where we had Darwin Box, and it is like a complete, fully, it has achieved PMF, Unicorn, everything. The other tools which we use were not at a PMF stage. They were not. They were at an MVP. One of them had, let's say, a few features. Let's say Darwin Box has 10, they had 4 features. Whereas another one had only 2 features, but still people are using it. It's not
Right.
like people are not using it. But it again depends on what sort of industry you're into. But if you focus on one particular metric, and if you price an MVP, you are not. I mean, revenue is obviously important, but if you're able to price your product well, you can sort of go ahead. I mean, it's important to understand कि user के लिए क्या important है, क्या important नहीं है. For example, in terms of if I talk about HRMS, probably the most important thing is attendance tracking. Birthday किसका आ रहा है, किसका नहीं आ रहा है is probably not that important, right? What is more important is people being able to sort of get each other's contacts. पिछले टाउन हॉल में क्या डिस्कस हुआ, that is not that important, right? So, I mean, या फिर HRMS में what is more important is कि you're able to sort of download your salary slip, right? That is important. But
Right.
a lot of other things are not important. So if you can take apart, let's say, the 7 and next level features and just focus on the core 3 features, which which have like 80% impact on the employee, you can sell your product and you can do that MVP. Again, having said that, in a few cases, it's not 100% possible to achieve your MVP without building your entire without building a significant amount of product. So we had a startup during our last cohort, which was building a tool similar to Zoom. So you can't build it without building a product, right? You can't if a person can't do a meeting without you building a product, so it doesn't make sense.
Right.
So again, it again depends from industry to industry, but I think in most cases you can build an MVP with a few product features.
Okay. Understood. Okay, then probably moving to the next slide, to the PMF stage, right, guys? So PMF, the basic understanding of PMF, how do you define कि I have achieved a PMF? Okay. So in simple terms, in a one-liner, a PMF is a product that is solving a problem for a significant number of people, and they are willing to pay for that solution that you have made for the price that you are basically asking for, right? So these are the three major things that we need to see over here. We need to create a solution that is solving a problem for a decent enough number of people. Now we need to understand that they are willing to pay for it. And then the third thing that we need to understand is that they are willing to pay for the price that we are asking for, right? So we need to define over here certain metrics in terms of the number of people that are paying for the solution that we have, and there are other metrics as well that we need to understand before saying that I have achieved the PMF stage, right? So Chintan sir over here would love to get your insights as to how one can make sure that if whether they have achieved a product that has a fit and potentially they can move for the scaling aspect of things, right?
I think PMF is probably the most misunderstood term in the startup world. So, but I've seen it with so many founders. A lot of founders have achieved this decent amount of revenue. They've achieved a decent number of customers, and the belief is that we have achieved product market fit. Although it's just a term, so I will not get into it's not really required because PMF for most of the startups is at least bare minimum minimum 1 year down the line. For a lot of them, it is 3-4 years down the line. So giving it a lot of time here might not make a lot of sense. But why I'm giving a certain amount of time is probably because it is a misunderstanding. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपके अगर आपने let's say 50 lakhs का MRR कर लिया तो आपका PMF achieve हो गया. It's not like that. 1 crore, 1.5 crore doesn't matter. So PMF is something which is very simple. कि आपका PMF का मतलब ये है कि you have customers who are willing to pay a certain amount of money for your product, right? And it is not just that, and that is why it is misunderstood. If a customer is willing to pay a significant amount of money, doesn't mean you have achieved PMF. There are other things which are attached to it. What are those other things? So first is that do you have a significantly high retention rate? क्या आपके बहुत सारे कस्टमर रिटेन हो रहे हैं या नहीं हो रहे, राइट? What is the repeat rate? What is the churn rate? Are you able to retain your customers? Are you able to grow? What is the growth rate? Are you able to grow beyond a certain point of time? What kind of market share have you captured?
Right.
That is also important. What is also important is कि आपका NPS, are your customer satisfied with you? आपका NPS score क्या चल रहा है? I think what you mentioned here, Monish, is a brilliant term. कि 40% survey is something which was coined, I think, by a gentleman, I don't remember his name. Is that 40% of customer अगर आपके ये बोल रहे हैं कि ये product अगर चला गया तो हमारी तो life hell हो जाएगी. Something where when you can say that you have achieved product market fit. For example, for Uber or for Zomato, right? These are bigger companies at this point of time. In case these companies tomorrow if Zomato goes, it's a catastrophe, right? For Uber goes, how do we come back from work or how do we take a cab, right? So we can't imagine our life without these, or probably Zoom on which we are having this webinar. We can't imagine our life without these products, right? So if 40% of people are saying that my life will be screwed without these products, then it probably means you've achieved product market. But I think broadly, if your people are willing to pay for your product, you have decent amount of market share, very low conversion, very low churn rate, high retention rate, high growth rate. But along with that, I think all these things have to be supplemented by by a lower, sort of a marketing cost. When I say marketing or customer retention cost, because a lot of times what happens is that our growth rates and customer retention rates are fueled by the fact that how much amount of money are we spending to acquire and retain customers. If we are acquiring them at a very very significant high cost, that means that our PMF is achieved PMF is a bubble which will burst someday. So वो एक बहुत बड़ी चीज है which we need to consider while while making sure that okay we have achieved the right. So आपको honestly बताऊं तो at Park Plus when we are doing this this particular car wash wala thing, we at the end were not able to achieve PMF despite having scaled to 10,000 cars. Why? Because our growth, our retention was fueled by a significant amount of marketing costs. Our customer acquisition cost was significantly high, but we had achieved everything else. We had a high growth rate, we had a high retention rate of 85%. We had a high NPS of 52%. तो मतलब ये सब चीजें were there, right? But the only thing was that the customer was not willing to pay beyond a certain point of time. If we used to increase the cost beyond a certain threshold, which is $800, the retention used to drop. That is the first thing. Second thing, customer acquisition, if we used to reduce our budgets by a certain percentage, the growth rates were also dropping. And that is the reason why, despite having 10,000 active subscriptions at that point of time, we were not able to achieve PMF. And this is having done that business for over 2.5 years. This is after that, right? So when people say that we've achieved PMF in the first 6 months, it is probably not there. We are missing out on a certain parameter.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, something similar happened in the edtech industry as well. Startups
Yeah.
thought that they have achieved a decent level of PMF, they move forward for the scaling part, but eventually that bubble bursted. Right. Okay. So there is one question from Rashmi. She wants to understand, ke, isn't the revenue the only important metric? People might be active, take desired action, etc. But if they are not willing to pay, then everything else is not quite relevant.
Correct. मतलब I think she's right. So if they're not willing to pay, then doesn't make sense. क्योंकि आप कितना भी बड़ा product. So for example, according to me, credit doesn't have a PMF at this point of time because people are not they're not able to monetize. Well, despite of having high revenues, they don't really the kind of return they would have wanted from acquiring these customers, having high credit scores and being among the top 1% in the country. They've not been able to monetize them to a certain. They've been able to monetize to a certain extent only, but ideally, जो जो होना चाहिए, they're not really there. Despite starting in 2000.